welcome to the Newburyport Literary Festival. As you can see on your screen, you are at the Dumplings and Dysfunction panel discussion. My name is Jennifer Entwistle, and I'm the co-director of the festival. This is our 17th year of bringing authors and readers together and our 3rd year as a virtual event. This one is going to be great. I happen to love A Strong Sense of Place, and they are talking to an awesome author. This is going to be a really wonderful discussion. So let's get started with some introductions. So we have Melissa Jewell Wan and David Humphreys with us. They are the co-creators of A Strong Sense of Place, a podcast and website dedicated to armchair travel and books with vivid settings. Each episode of their show focuses on one destination. They discuss what makes that place different from anywhere else, then recommend 5 books that took them there on the page. They are introverts who love travel adventures and exploring new places. In 2017, they sold almost all of their stuff and moved from the US to Prague in the Czech Republic with their laptops and their cat Smudge. So they are joining us from Prague. And I don't see Smudge anywhere there, but if
you won't.
Appearance,
there's zero chance.
No, she's in the closet.
And we also have with us Lan Samantha Chang. She is the award-winning author of a collection of short fiction, Hunger, and 2 novels, Inheritance and All Is Forgotten. All is Forgotten, Nothing is Lost. The director of the Iowa Writers Workshop. She lives in Iowa City. I am going to disappear, and I'm going to let you guys talk. Thank you very much for joining us, and let's hear about the Family Chao.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today, we are going to attempt to recreate a little bit of what we do every podcast. We're going to talk about one destination, which in this case is restaurant, and then we're going to talk about a whole bunch of books that we love that have that strong sense of place, that tell you more about what it's like to be and live and work around a restaurant. And we're going to roughly follow our structure that we do on the show. The first thing we're going to do is a 101. Mel's going to talk a little bit about the restaurant life, and then we're going to go do 2 truths and a lie. You're going to get to participate in that. I'm going to say 3 statements. 2 of them will be true, 1 of them not, and you can tell me which one you think is a lie. Then Mel and Sam are going to talk about the Family Chao. So then Sam's going to talk about a book she loves that has to do with restaurants, and then I'm going to cheat and mention a whole bunch of books, and then we're going to have Q&A, and we're going to do all of that in 1 hour.
I believe in us.
Yeah, so that's the plan. Is there anything else you want to?
No, I think that was good.
All right, cool. Let's get started with the 101.
Okay.
All right.
So I was born into a restaurant family. My grandfather owned the Garfield Diner in Pottsville, Pennsylvania.
We've got a picture.
And
there it is.
It was one of those shiny chrome diners that shows up on a truck where you could sit at the counter and drink coffee and make wisecracks with the waitress and hang out with the other regulars. That is the world of my grandfather's life for much of his adulthood. And that's the environment that my dad grew up in. In 1960, when JFK was still a US Senator, he campaigned for president right in front of my grandfather's diner. And that's the picture you see on the right there. The town of Pottsville had a population of 21,659 people at the time, and 12,000 of them showed up for JFK. My dad, when he became a young man, he was about 20, he bought the restaurant called the Country Squire from my grandfather. And that place was a combination of coffee shops. So when you walked in, it was kind of like a diner. And then if you turned left, you went into the formal dining room that had heavy wooden furniture and really bad 1970s carpet. And there was a motel attached and also a bar called the Mediterranean Lounge. This was in Schuylkill Haven, Pennsylvania, pretty far from the Mediterranean. Muhammad Ali was a semi-regular. His training camp was in Deer Lake, which is a couple of towns over. And one time Andy Warhol came to the restaurant, And there's this family story that Andy Warhol made a...
You skipped the bit where Muhammad Ali signed your cast when
Yes,
you were a kid.
when I broke my leg in 3rd grade, Muhammad Ali signed my cast. Very exciting. He called me Mo-Lissa when I was little. And Andy Warhol came one time.
Sure.
I don't know how true this story is, but the family mythology is that Andy Warhol sketched something on a napkin and my dad threw it away. I really hope that's not true. I just like to pretend that that's not true. My family had dinner at our restaurant at least once a week, and celebrations like birthdays, anniversaries, family reunions, they all happened at the Country Squire. And that was also the first place that I ever had a job. I eventually worked every position in the restaurant except waitress. I was never a waitress for my dad, but I did that at a different restaurant.
What was the first gig you had?
My first gig at the restaurant was bookkeeper.
Yeah, you were 11?
I was 11.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. Anyone who knows me, you guys know I'm a reader and I'm a word nerd. I am not good at numbers. I don't know how I ended up the bookkeeper, but there you go.
Pretty sure your dad was setting up plausible deniability.
I think he was also trying to keep me out of the kitchen because my next job was dishwasher, and there was a lot of flirting going on when I was like 15 working in the dishwasher.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Lots of cute boys in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of this to say, restaurants and food are kind of in my DNA. And I love stories that are set in restaurants because it's such a rich environment for really great stories. One of the things that I think really works in its favor is that it's an enclosed space, right? Like if we learned anything from Agatha Christie, it's that sticking all different kinds of people into a place that they can't really leave creates really interesting situations. So in a restaurant, you've got people working together somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, and they are stuck with each other whether they like it or not. There's also this kind of blend of professional environment where people need to be good at their jobs, and it's super high stress, particularly when you're having a rush and you're trying to get food out the door at the same time. But then there's also these downtimes where there's nothing to do except maybe polish some silverware or, stock the shelves, make sure there's coffee filters for breakfast the next morning. And that's when the stuff really happens because people are gossiping and telling jokes. I learned a lot of jokes that were completely inappropriate for my age when I was working at my dad's restaurant. I still remember some of them. And now when I think about them, I'm like, oh, I didn't actually know what that one even meant. That was pretty dirty. Yeah. The other thing that was really striking for me growing up in the restaurant and then reading a bunch of books set in restaurants is that even though it's this high pressure environment where you have all different kinds of people working together, they really do often form a found family. And the thing that's really interesting about the Family Chao is that there's a real family running this restaurant, but then there's also the people who aren't members of the family that form the community around that family, which is all to say that there are a lot of complicated relationships when you get into the kitchen of a restaurant. And in the form of a chef, there's a patriarch, right? The chef is kind of the supreme authority in the kitchen, in the restaurant. It can be a father figure. It can be, people can sort of form a cult of personality around him. If you've read Anthony Bourdain's book, Kitchen Confidential, he describes chefs as pirates and brigands, I think. So there are really big personalities in the kitchen and in the front of the house. And every single one of those people has a story, right? The dishwasher, the busboy, the waitress, the hostess, they play different roles in the restaurant, and they all could be the star of their own story. So that's why I think stories set in restaurants are so compelling, because you get food, you get people. Really, what else is there? That is life. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into Two Truths and a Lie is a little bit of context for how Chinese food made its way to the United States, and specifically the Midwest. when I was growing up in rural Pennsylvania, there were a couple of Chinese restaurants nearby, and I always wondered how these people ended up in this tiny town in coal country and how they felt about being there. I was excited they were there because I love the food, but I always wondered what their experience was like and how they ended up in this town that no one else had ever really heard of. Chinese food in the United States starts with the California Gold Rush in 1850. The promise of gold attracted fortune seekers from all over the world, and that included Chinese immigrants, mostly from Canton, who put their cooking skills to work in restaurants that were called Chow Chows. And at first, the customers were mostly Chinese. There was a lot of nose to tail cooking happening, and Americans are kind of squeamish about that stuff. But eventually, the cooks learned that they could please the American palate by taking the maybe less attractive bits, dumping them in some batter, and deep frying them. Deep fry everything, you will get an American to eat it. And American Chinese food became much more popular. And eventually, it started to move east. It became such a part of the American cityscape that in 1929, the artist Edward Hopper actually painted two stylish women in cloche hats in a chop suey shop. And there it is. I love that painting. I would love to time travel into that painting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A couple of decades later, during World War II, China became a US ally, and Chinese food wasn't just accepted, it was now really glamorized. It represented the taste of adventure and sophistication. But most Chinese restaurants still offered some American food too. So you had your egg foo young and your fried rice, and then alongside that, you had maybe fried chicken and crab cakes. Again, taking advantage of that deep fryer to make everybody feel a little more comfortable. Love that. There was a Chinese restaurant in Reading, Pennsylvania, which was the city near where we lived. And yeah, we would go there and have poo-poo platter, and it looked a lot like that image. Absolutely love that. Okay, after World War II, Chinese restaurants continued to expand around the United States, and they hit the coast, which is when things start to get really sexy. In San Francisco, LA, New York, and Washington, D.C., going for Chinese became a really hip way to spend an evening. And according to legend, this is our big finish on our Restaurant 101. According to legend, a meeting over Chinese food at Washington, D.C.'s Yenching Palace helped settle the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962.
Well done.
Yeah, I hope that's true. I don't know if that's true. If you are interested in learning more about Chinese food in the United States, there are two books I can recommend. And that's where I got that little tidbit about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I'm going to assume it's true. The first is The Fortune Cookie Chronicles, Adventures in the World of Chinese Food by Jennifer 8 Lee. And the second is Chop Suey, A Cultural History of Chinese Food in the United States by Andrew Ko. Both of those are fairly old books, but they're really well written. They're super fun, and you can probably get them at your library. So bonus. If you have any questions about that, please do put them into the Q&A section, and we will get to them at the end. We have 10 minutes set aside at the end for questions. So fire it up in the Q&A.
Although we're already behind, so that's exciting.
Good. I'm proud to say I went over my allotted time.
Okay, so now we're going to do two truths and a lie. I am going to read three statements. Two of them are true. One of them is not. Mel does not know, and neither do you.
Does Sam.
Neither does Sam or anybody else know which one is the lie. So here they go. First statement.
Ready.
There is a restaurant in Las Vegas called the Heart Attack Grill. It specializes in unhealthy food. 3 people have died while eating there.
Come on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Statement 2, the oldest continuously operating Chinese restaurant in the United States is in Seattle. It has been running for over 100 years. And statement 3, the opening lyrics of Stevie Nicks' immortal classic At the Age of 17 were taken almost verbatim from a restaurant's menu. In Phoenix.
That sounds made up.
Important. It does sound made up. So to remind you what that sounds like, I'm going to play you the opening of Edge of 17. I have a hope. My hope is that by playing this from my phone and through Zoom and then through whatever speaker you're listening to on your end, we'll be able to recreate the sonic environment of my mother's 1980 Toyota Corolla hatchback, which is where I would have first heard this song. Okay, here we go.
Sounds good.
Right?
Sounds like a roller skating rink.
All right. That's it. Those are the three statements. Here, I'll put them up on here. Let me know which one you think is the lie. Put it into the chat. Let's go with chat. All right. And then we'll take them in order. The statement is, there's a restaurant in Vegas called the Heart Attack Grill. 3 people have died there.
Yeah. Is it actually that like 20 people? Sorry, that is terrible. But I mean, it's right there in the name.
Yes? True? False?
True.
True. It's true. Yeah. There's the Heart Attack Grill is right off of Fremont Street. There it is. True. About a block from the overhead lights there, if you're familiar with Las Vegas. If you're looking at this picture, the neon sign down below that you may be looking at that and saying, does that mean if you're over 350 pounds, you eat free? Yes, that's exactly what that means. If you're over 350 pounds, you eat free there. This place has all of the subtlety and respect for a life well lived that we've come to expect from Las Vegas.
I mean, Las Vegas does have some pretty amazing restaurants. I don't know why you would go to the Heart Attack Grill.
So this place makes a point out of serving things that are not healthy. This here is a burger that they serve that comes in at almost 20,000 calories.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really cute girl.
Yeah. And this is a really good picture of that hamburger, by the way. Usually it's kind of melty and glooped. They have a buttermilk milkshake there that's designed to be as fatty as possible without being butter. And it's served with a pat of butter on top. And since it opened 11 years ago, 3 people have died there.
R.I.P. Adventures in Las Vegas.
Yep. Despite that, TripAdvisor still has them at 4 stars after almost 3,000 reviews.
I mean, the fries look pretty good.
Yeah. Second statement. The oldest continuously operating Chinese restaurant in the U.S. has been in Seattle for over 100 years. What do you think?
I don't know. What do you think, Sam?
Sam says it's true.
I mean, I'm going to defer to Sam.
That is the lie. The oldest Chinese restaurant in the U.S. is more than 100 years old, but it is not in Seattle or San Francisco or Chicago or New York or L.A. It is in Butte, Montana.
Oh, that is awesome.
That's wild.
Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yep. It's called the Peking Noodle Parlor. It started in 1911 by a couple of Chinese immigrants who came to try their luck in the gold rush. And they found no gold and lots of racism. But they also found a lot of other Chinese people who wanted a taste of home. As you might expect, the restaurant itself is very old school. It's in an unassuming looking building that you just saw. On South Main, there's an old neon sign outside that came up in the 20s and looks it. When you go in, you walk through that door and up those stairs. You can either sit in one of the small orange rooms here. There are 17 of them with privacy curtains, or you can take a seat at the bar.
Oh, I love that bar. Okay, that is just got added as a new life goal to go there. That looks amazing.
Yeah, they have Chinese American classics like chow mein and chop suey and egg foo young. And if you eat in the room, the food arrives on a trolley.
Cool.
Yeah, the reviews are so contentious that I want to go there. I'm not sure if it's amazing, great flavor, authentic taste, or perhaps worst food ever that will leave you profoundly disappointed. But it's somewhere between those, probably. And then, finally, Stevie Nicks. The opening lyrics of "At the age of 17" were taken from a menu in a Phoenix restaurant. That is true. So in 1980, Stevie Nicks, seen here later, was working on a new song. She was inspired because she was talking to Tom Petty's first wife, Jane, and she'd asked Jane when they'd met, and Jane said at the age of 17. And Stevie heard that as the edge of 17. She had a family emergency. She went back to Phoenix, where she'd been born. She walked into a restaurant, picked up a menu, and read, "The white-winged dove sings a song that sounds like she's singing, ooh, ooh, ooh. She makes her home here in the great saguaro cactus that provides shelter and protection for her."
Nice.
Yeah. So Nix took that bit and went on to write one of the greatest songs of her career. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. So while I was doing the research for this, I found out that there's an event in 6 days in New York City. It's called the Night of 1,000 Stevies. It bills itself as the largest and most beloved Stevie Nicks fan event in the world. It is a drag show. The 30th annual Night of 1,000 Stevies comes up on Friday, May 6th. 10 years ago when they had this event, they got a video from Stevie Nicks herself saying that she would attend someday in disguise, and no one would know who she was until she got on stage, whipped off her disguise, and sang this.
Strong finish, Dave.
Right? Yeah. That's Two Truths and a Lie.
So good.
If tickets, oh, by the way, tickets are still available to this event, and if I was anywhere in New York City, I would be there. That's it. That's Two Truths and a Lie.
Well done, Dave.
Thanks.
I learned some cool stuff, and now we have a reason
Oh,
to.
I didn't show that. There's the photo.
Really cute.
Yeah.
And now we have another reason to go to. Was it Montana?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go to that restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the Family Chao, which is really exciting. I absolutely loved this book, everyone. It's so good. You need to get your hands on a copy immediately. There's lots of food, good Americanized food, really awesome authentic food. There is so much delicious family drama. And then there's a murder. It's all the things I love. I mean, I don't love murder in real life, but on the page,
she wouldn't tell you guys that anyway.
100%. Also, there's amazing courtroom drama. So there's a really strong sense of restaurant, but there's also this really strong sense. Amazing characters. We're going to start by asking Sam, for people who haven't had the great good fortune to read this book yet, can you tell them a little bit about what it's about, what they can expect, how you came to write it? Just give us the scoop.
Sure. Thanks for that description. I would say The Family Chao is a restaurant succession novel in which the sort of tyrannical but charismatic immigrant who's made his fortune in this restaurant in the Midwest, his name is Leo Chao, but they call him Big Chao because he's the boss. He is sort of really unwilling to entertain his oldest son's idea that maybe he should become a partner. He doesn't think he's going to die. This is one of the sort of charming facts about Leo. He's so confident that he hasn't created a will. And he just doesn't want to share his life's work and his American fortune, which, he's been squirreling away money on the side, no one knows where, with his oldest son. And and this is where the conflict in the book comes from. He has actually three sons, and one of the subjects of the book is also about what it's like to be like a long-term assimilated, immigrant family in the U.S. They're all different. They were all born at a different point in the family's American dream. I would say, the oldest son, they just started off. They were very positive. They were going to make everything, they were going to become rich and happy. And he was spoiled, I think, a little bit by his parents. Thinks he deserves, for example, to be given the partnership of the restaurant. His name is Dago, or William. And then the second son is, I think, as middle child myself, got a bit of middle child syndrome. He got sort of acclimated to working in the restaurant, as they all did, but he quit doing it in high school to become, I don't know, better than his family. Mm-hmm. And he left the Midwest. He left the restaurant and went to New York and became rich. And he's just not going back there. And then they have a youngest child who's just trying to be a good boy, wants to be a doctor like his parents wanted to be. And the novel starts when they're all meeting in Wisconsin to discuss this issue about what's going to happen to the restaurant. And like wacko things ensue, I would say. Yeah. A lot of complicated things happen. Culminating, the restaurant is the scene of what I've been calling an omnivore's holiday party. Yes. In the middle of the book, where they basically eat a ton.
Yeah, that party. I wanted to transport myself into that Christmas party with all of that food so much. So you have talked about how this book is kind of inspired by or an homage to the brothers Karamazov. And that book, for people who haven't read it, is about in its most simplistic description of the plot, is about the lives of three Russian brothers who are very different from each other. As Sam just explained, in this book, we've got the Chao brothers, Dago, Ming, and James. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to set their story in a restaurant rather than some other family business?
I thought about this question when I was working on the book, because the idea of the restaurant, it's pretty early on in the writing of the book, but I made a conscious decision to set the book in a restaurant for a lot of reasons. For one thing, they needed to have something to care about and fight over. Mm-hmm. And it just felt to me that it also needed to be something that involved all of them as a family. And the fact is, the mother, gave her life to sort of working at the restaurant, and so did the father. And to a certain extent, all three of the children spent like their childhoods, they grew up at the restaurant. And I wanted it to be a place that was also relatable. And, mm-hmm. and also, frankly, my inspiration for the novel, like my first inspiration, which happened, I don't know, like 20 years ago, I was looking through my writing logs and I found this sentence. It said, "The story takes place in one night. It is a huge dinner party." Yes. And it just all sort of converged. It had to be at a restaurant. It had to be about a restaurant. I have this teacher from a million years ago when I was a student at the Iowa Writers Workshop, where I now teach, Marilyn Robinson. And she always said, when you choose something to put into a book, it should work in like 3 or 4 ways and hopefully 5 or 6 ways, just a ton of different ways. And the restaurant, it was such a center. The minute I thought of it, I thought this has got to be the central issue, the central place, really, in the book. Yeah.
So, from earlier in this conversation that I grew up in my dad's restaurant. Every detail you included in the book rang true to me, which made me wonder if you have experience working in a restaurant, and if not, how did you get this insight into the inner workings of the family dynamics and the found family dynamics and kind of the rhythm of getting the food out?
I loved those photos you showed. They were just amazing photos. This is the most amazing. Well, okay. So confession, I am not from a restaurant family, but as I was considering this question, I mean, other people have asked me this question, but nobody's asked me who actually is from a restaurant family. So I had to think really hard. And I realized that there's basically two things. One, I am obsessed with food. I just eat a ton. Which isn't ideal, but it is a thing. I have spent an enormous amount of time in restaurants. I've lived in a lot of different cities, despite the fact that I've been in the Midwest for a long time now, as I was telling y'all. I go to Midwestern restaurants, but I've also lived in different places. I lived near San Francisco for a long time. I lived in New York. I lived in Boston. So I'm always trying out restaurants. Okay, so that's one thing, the food obsession. But then the other thing is that I'm a creature of habit. So I go to the same restaurants in wherever I'm living. I'll go to the same place over and over at all different times and order the same things or try new things. And I become an observer of a specific place wherever I live or whenever I find a restaurant that I really like. So, I mean, there are places that I've been to, probably 50, 60 times, more than that, actually. In Iowa City, there's a restaurant. Sometimes I used to have lunch and dinner there when I was meeting with people for work, over and over. I practically lived at the restaurant. So I became highly attuned to like specific restaurants. And I think that's probably why it wasn't much of a reach to set this in a Chinese restaurant. Also, my sister was a waitress at a Chinese restaurant in Wisconsin when I was growing up, and she came home with stories. And the other thing is my parents were friends with some restaurant owners in Wisconsin, and we would go to that restaurant over and over again. And they came to our house, that kind of thing. So I guess I'm steeped in it without consciously trying to be.
Yeah, well, you did a fantastic job of recreating what that's like.
Thanks. I'm really flattered.
So the characters in the story get into some pretty dark territory. I mean, there's a murder that's pretty dark, but it's also very, very funny. There are parts where I laughed out loud. I call it my whoop. It just makes me go like, ha! That happened to me a lot when I was reading this. And the overall experience of reading it is really fun, even though you go through some kind of treacherous waters along the way. Sure. Leo, the patriarch, he is hilarious because the things he says are so audacious. You just can't believe the things that come out of his mouth. And I feel like there's an alternate reality where this book is sorrowful instead of fun. Did that humor emerge as you were writing, or was that a conscious decision from the beginning to kind of bring some levity to these, topics of racism and being a long-term immigrant and tyrannical fathers?
That's a really good question. I actually wrote sorrowful books. I wrote one very sorrowful book. It was my first book. It's called Hunger, actually, ironically. I mean, the hunger that it's discussing is sort of spiritual hunger or, emotional hunger, but it's called Hunger. And it takes place in New York City. And one of the characters works at a restaurant. They work at a restaurant when it starts off and intermittently throughout. And I guess, I changed as a person so I wrote that book it was published in 1998. In the last 24 years, I've thought a lot about my family of origin. I grew up in Wisconsin. I am the daughter of 2 immigrants from China. I have 3 sisters. So as in my book, there are many siblings of the same sex. And my dad was pretty charismatic and tyrannical. He was not as immoral as Leo Chao. He was not as good with money as Leo Chao. but he was, a real character. And some of the lines in the novel are taken straight out of his mouth. I guess what I realized that I started learning to write in this era when we were supposed to, everyone was writing in this kind of really low key, kind of minimalist style. And that suits itself in many ways, not for everyone, but, if you're going to get the essential bare bones of the story, to tragedy, to sadness, to sort of silence and spareness and things that are unsaid and lost. And that's a lot of my first book. But over time, even while I was writing that book, I thought, I am not capturing the whole picture of what it was like to grow up in our house. And my friends would read my work and say, Sam, you're funny, but your work is really not funny. What would happen if I just wrote whatever, what I wanted to? And, I tried to create the whole thing. And this is how I sort of evolved into a book that had the same material, but a very different tone.
Yeah.
The material is also a little more extreme than in my early books. And I feel that, I've gotten older and sort of become aware of extreme material a little bit more than I had when I was younger. And so I think that humor actually, counterpoints that. But I also think that a lot of times humor is funny. I mean, they say comedy is tragedy speeded up. You can bring out the sorrow of certain things and the wistfulness and sadness and loss. You can contrast it. You get a stronger sense of dynamic if you include like a larger emotional scope. Anyway, it wasn't really conscious. I did it because I decided I wanted to be myself more.
Yeah. Well, it worked. It's really, really fun and really moving and impactful. I really enjoyed it. And I really encourage everyone at the session today to get your hands on this book.
And good on you for being more who you are. It's not an easy thing to do,
No, it hasn't been easy. And people have said, why are these people, why are they so flawed? Like, you should be writing about like really good immigrants. And I thought, that's, I don't know. It feels like it's cutting off a large part of who people are. Anyway.
I could talk about that for a long time. Leo's a challenging person, but he's not, I don't know. Is he a bad person? I don't know.
It's a big story.
Yeah, we could talk about that for a really long time. Okay. Dave told me that we have to wrap up our conversation now. So thank you for answering those questions. And for our audience, if you have more questions for Sam, put them in the Q&A. We'll get to them at the end. Now we move on to the portion of our show where we recommend more books, because you can never have too many books. And Sam is going to go first.
Okay. I'm going to talk about a brand new book. This is a novel by Michelle Hunovan. It's called Search. Michelle Hunovan, she's written 4 other novels, and they've all been shortlisted or won major prizes. They're called Round Rock, James Land, Blame, and Off Course. Okay, Michelle, so she's a really serious writer. She's a singular contemporary writer, and that she is both a Guggenheim Fellow in fiction, which is a big deal, and an amazing food writer. So her fiction,
such a good combo.
I know. Well, it's a rare combo, actually. Yeah. Her fiction has appeared in Harper's, and her food writing has appeared in the LA Times, the New York Times, Gourmet, Food and Wine, etc. So she's, as far as I can remember, because I've read her books, I don't remember her writing as much about food ever as she does in this book. But the thing is, I had been waiting eagerly for years for this next novel, because I will say, aside from the food, many of her characters in her novels are people who grapple honestly with this question about how to live, like not how to live, but how do we make do and understand what we've been given as we live our lives among other human beings. And she doesn't answer that question in an easy, simple way, but in her books, there are these wonderful moments of what I would call incremental understanding and change and grace. So in Search, the plot is that the protagonist, whose name is Dana Patowski, is asked to join the search committee for her Unitarian church because they're looking for a new minister to replace, someone who's been there for a super long time. Now, somehow, Michelle, she's such a masterful writer that she manages to make this search into this edge of the chair, toe curled suspense novel. I mean,
that's awesome.
It's really hard to describe it. Okay, so that for me was fascinating. Having served on search committees, having being a person who's kind of an adult with an interest in an institution or community. The writer's workshop where I run the program is not like a church, but it is similar to a church in that we have some larger issue that we love, which is art, which is writing. And we make a community around that. So anyway, to make the novel even more exciting for me, and I think for most readers, every one of the search committee meetings, as well as several meetings where members are discussing strategy or trying to woo each other or others over to their side or worry about problems on the search, is held over a meal, either at a restaurant or at somebody's house. And there are a lot of restaurant meals. It's amazing the amount of food that's in this book. The reason there's so many restaurant meals is that Dana Patowski, the main character, is a food critic. Like Michelle, the author, Michelle Hunovan, she's a food critic. And so you get this kind of real, angle about what it's like to be a food critic. For example, every time she goes out to eat with some members of the search committee, she has to try everything that everyone orders. And the one rule is that no one's allowed to order the same thing. But I just want to read a description of one thing served at one strategic lunch in the novel so you can see what the writing is like. The egg rolls arrived first, blistered and dangerously hot from the deep fryer, filled with wood ear mushrooms, glass noodles, and ground pork. They came with a heap of lettuce leaves, bean sprouts, sliced cucumber, and herbs. To eat one, you flatten a lettuce leaf, set an egg roll on it, scatter mint, basil, cilantro, and shiso leaves over it, add sprouts, cucumber, and pickled carrot, then roll it up. A messy business. We each wrapped a roll as snugly as we could, not very, and dumped them in clear, cold, sweet, salty sauce. The first bite is a jolt of simultaneity, hot and cold, meat and herbs, sweet and salty, deep fried crunch, and fresh lettuce crunch. We devoured our first rolls in reverential silence. I mean, amazing writing. And don't you want to rush out?
Yes.
That's how you rank it on food there.
Members, they eat Vietnamese food, as I just described, seafood chowder, healthy chocolate chip cookies that are also really good, slow cooked brisket, salmon, steaks, cinnamon rolls, many other delicious things. And then to make it more amazing, after you finish reading this genuinely moving, sort of fascinating, complex, and suspenseful novel with great characters, there are 13 recipes. So Michelle Hunovan, author, has an amazing kitchen in Los Angeles at her house, and she tested every one of these recipes and chose which ones to include. And truly, this is a delicious book. So that's my recommendation.
Fantastic.
Nice
that's
one. Yeah,
such a good
sounds
recommendation.
great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Loved everything about it.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I mean, I really enjoyed the book, and I'm going to make some of the recipes. Some of them look hard for me, but I think I can do some of them.
That's awesome. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, I am going to talk about some books. If you're interested in reading more about books that take you into restaurants, I've got a few recommendations. I'm going to blow through these fairly quickly.
I just want to say that if you've never listened to our show, Dave is cheating big time right now.
Yeah, fact. Yeah.
One book.
Oh.
Yep. So the first one I mentioned is, I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of this book. It's Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. It felt weird to not mention it. I can't believe this book is 20 years old now. This is the book that launched Anthony Bourdain. In it, he talks about what it's like to work in a high-end restaurant kitchen. Spoiler, it's a tough gig, but it brings the people together like pirates. So he somehow makes it sound awful and wonderful at the same time, which is a really good trick. And if you're looking for somewhere to start, that's an easy recommendation. The next is Crescent by Diane Abu Jaber. This is a love story. It's set in a family-owned Lebanese restaurant. The restaurant's in LA. It's an LA neighborhood that's known for its population of Iraqi immigrants. In this book, our hero is an Iraqi-American chef, and she meets an Iraqi literature professor, and that starts her down a path of exploring what it means to be Iraqi and far from home. And then the real world intervenes and into their new relationship, and they both have to face sort of the past and an uncertain future. The book features a found family of immigrants and bowls of hummus and kebabs and saffron rice. And if you're looking for something that explores how a restaurant can be a substitute for home, this is a really great start. It's Crescent by Diane Abu Jaber. This one, this is a nonfiction book, Restaurant Success by the Numbers by Roger Fields. It's a nonfiction book about how to run a restaurant. I talked about this book in our restaurant episode, and it was controversial in our home. It remains controversial in our home.
I was so angry writing about this book for our website.
I am of the opinion that one of the best ways to learn about something is to read a nonfiction book intended for people who are professionals in that field. Mel is of the opinion that she would never in 1,000 years read this book.
I had to flip through it to find a quote for our website, and I was so mad the entire time.
And I get that. But also, this book has changed my view of every restaurant I've walked into since. So you're going to have to figure out where you land on that whole thing. But if you're interested in what it takes to run a restaurant, this book is readable and skimmable and full of wisdom. It's Restaurant Success by the Numbers by Roger Fields.
Be like Dave with an open mind. Don't be like me.
Aw, that's sweet. The next one is just a fun book. This is Envy of Angels by Matt Wallace. It's, like I said, fun with a side of food prep. It's an urban fantasy where the lead character is a chef who runs a catering company with a very dangerous clientele. His clientele are demons. Yeah. He feeds demons. In this book, two new chefs are introduced to the world of demons in modern day Manhattan. Metaphor, maybe. They have coworkers who are not entirely human. They have arcane culinary techniques. They've got a secret pantry with unusual culinary ingredients, and they've got an enormous enchanted chicken.
I mean, it sells itself.
It does. Ultimately, the story gets down to an adventure to find a secret ingredient for the most important catering job in the universe. It's fun and funny and delightful. And if you like this, there are 6 others in that series, each focused on a separate deadly sin. It's Envy of Angels by Matt Wallace. And then I'm going to wrap up with this one, Last Night at the Lobster by Stuart Nahn. I love the writing in this book so much. The story is about a manager of a Red Lobster, Manny DeLeon. Red Lobster corporate has decided to close down the outlet that he manages. The book takes place on the last night in that restaurant. This Red Lobster is one of those freestanding buildings in a parking lot in a mall. It's in Connecticut. It's 4 days before Christmas. There's a blizzard coming in.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a quiet story. This is one of those books where nothing happens and everything happens, right? It's just, you meet Manny, you hear about his life and his problems and his hopes and his fears. He's got a jacked up love life. He's got people who look right through him, but he's also got dignity and character. He still wants to make it a nice day for the people who will be unemployed when the shift ends at 11 o'clock. Everything in this book is rendered with loving detail. I had a moment when I was reading this book where I felt physically transported to the scene, where I felt like I was there. I was in a car and we were turning into a mall parking lot with the snow starting to come down, and it's all gray and brake lights, and you could smell that. I could smell that and hear the diesel truck idling. It was just right there. I know that is not a strong sense of place that most people are looking for, but if you're at all interested, I want to push this book into your hands. It's Last Night at the Lobster by Stuart Nunn.
Manny is such an amazing character. He's very heroic.
She did it again. She did this last year.
She's like magic.
Put up the QA slide and she appeared.
But yes, well, we've still got a few minutes. So if for everybody in the audience, if you have a question, get it into the Q&A now so we can try to hit it before we have to wrap up. But we do have a few in here, so I want to make sure we cover these. Melissa, is your dad related to General George Drouin of Pottsville, Pennsylvania? Yes, he is, it seems.
Yes, he is. We call him Cousin George. He's my dad's second cousin,
He's
I think.
a 5-star general?
Yeah, he was a brigadier general.
He was the head of NATO for a while. It is such an unlikely story path for this guy. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yes.
See?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Your dad is his cousin?
Yeah, second cousin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, the person was anonymous, so I don't know if that might be a family member who's just trying to put in a plug. I don't know.
If you want to know more, you can email me. I'll tell you the whole story.
Got it. Jana, who's joining us from Mexico, asks, curious what restaurant is Samantha's favorite with her vast experience in dining?
Yeah, same.
Oh, that's such an interesting question because for the last 2 years, I really haven't eaten out that much. But the restaurant that I remember most vividly is well in the past. It's a vegetarian Chinese restaurant and I cannot remember what it's called. I always remember where it was located, right under the bridge, in the part of Chinatown that I think is now very hip, near my grandmother's old temple in New York City. Sorry. I wish I could be more specific than that. There were amazing, amazing vegetarian dumplings. I just have never had such good vegetarian dumplings. My sisters and I would go eat there with my grandmother.
Where do you eat in Iowa?
Where do we eat in Iowa? Oh my goodness. Well, a lot of people in Iowa make food at home. A lot of people in Iowa gather mushrooms and, have very serious gardens and they make food at home. I don't know if that's helpful. There's really good fresh corn here, as you can imagine. Every summer, the food is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Mel and Dave, do you have a favorite restaurant in Prague that you want to tell us about?
Oh, boy. Okay. I'll do one Czech restaurant and one not Czech. Literally 40 seconds from our front door is a family-owned Czech restaurant called U3 Bojovníků, which means the 3 warriors.
Defenders.
3 defenders.
Can you put their names in the chat so that we can copy them down if we ever get to Prague?
Well, an open invitation. If anyone involved right now is ever coming to Prague, please email me and I will send you all of my favorite places because you want to go to the good places, not the tourist places. U3 Bojovníků is a family-owned restaurant. Almost all Czech restaurants have the same menu because under communism, there was one cookbook that was printed and available to restaurants and home cooks.
That's
so
wild.
all of the pub restaurants have the same menu, and it's basically pork schnitzel, chicken schnitzel, Vienna potato salad. There's a dish called spičková, which is a traditional Czech dish that is a beef tenderloin cooked in a creamy sauce made from root vegetables. That's served with dumplings. There's also roast duck, which comes with cabbage and dumplings. You're sensing dumpling here thing, I think. Goulash with dumplings. And beer.
Lots and lots
really,
of fresh,
really
delicious
good Czech beer.
Yeah. What's the other one you're going to talk about?
The other one I was going to talk about is a cafe called Sweet and Pepper Days, where we love to go for breakfast.
Okay.
They have really nice outdoor seating. A really big thing in the spring and summer in Czech Republic is lemonade, but it's not lemon flavored lemonade. It's more like fruit aid. It's fizzy water and some kind of fruit, and they usually put fresh herbs or fresh fruit in it. So there'll be like forest berry that has raspberries and blueberry, or grapefruit and thyme. And they call it lemonade, but there's actually a whole rainbow of flavors. And Sweet and Pepper Days has very good lemonade.
They do, and this is going to sound weird, but they do an amazing thing with pancakes.
It's true.
They change it out every quarter or so, and they have pancakes that have just this like amazing combinations of flavors. So blueberries and sour cream and a little cranberry, and then some kind of magic dust on top, and some nuts, and it's fantastic. Yeah, I feel like if I go there and I don't have the pancakes, I'm somehow insulting life, It's like that.
We do have one question here, so I want to fit it in. I think we can fit it in very quickly before we wrap up. So Alicia would like to hear more about Samantha's process of balancing the source material and being yourself in the writing.
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
I know it is kind of big. I'm going to let us go a minute. So go ahead.
No, I actually think that it's hard to balance, and that the only thing you can do is be grateful that novels, people never see the drafts. They only see the final product. So I just do everything, and then I try to revise it. I cut. I think this was 500 pages, and I cut it down to 330 pages.
Yeah. I read a bit recently that said editing is the process of realizing that the less of me there is in this material, the better it is.
Yeah.
Which I thought was an amazing observation. Like
that is amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm afraid that we're at the end of our time. So thank you so much, Samantha. Thank you, Mel and Dave. Thank you to our audience. There's been a lot of great chat going on. Everyone is so happy with the session. So thank you all for joining. If you have not heard of A Strong Sense of Place, I highly recommend it as a podcast. Get it in your ears right away, and definitely pick up the Family Chao. I know I am hungry right now, so I got to go grab something to eat before my next session.
There's the book. There's our logo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
That was the best event I've ever. It was just so really fun.
I didn't want to cut you off. I wanted to let you say that. Thank you.
It was really fun.
Thanks.
Have a great day, everyone.
So nice to meet you.